Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. It's Christmas in July, which is super exciting, one of my favorite times of the year, and we've decorated the whole craft room for Christmas as well, so we're really in the festive spirit. Now I know we're right in the middle of summer right now, but a lot of people like to start making their Christmas cards early. So this collection is for all of you who love to make your handmade greeting cards for Christmas and have lots to make, so you want to start prepping early. And you can also pick up some stamp sets if you want to use them later in the year, if you do like to kind of wait a little bit. This release is packed with some of my favorite Christmas designs. Some of them have a little more retro feel to them, and some of them are a little bit more modern. There's some images that are great for stamping, and some that are great for people who like to color stuff in. So really great mix for everybody in here. Also, some of the artwork in this release is licensed, which means we pay a really talented designer to create the designs, and we sort of put them into the stamp set and formulate it for you as a card maker to be able to create with those designs. This allows me to create stamp sets that are new and fresh, and maybe something that I wouldn't be able to draw on my own, but they're really amazing designs. And by the way, everything is out now, which is so exciting. I'll have links down below where you can check it out and go shopping, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Now without further ado, let's jump into today's release. Alright, first we have the 6x6 rubber background stamp called Nordic Knit. I love this one for all of the amazing sweater knit texture details that it has. You can see each one of these little images is made up of a bunch of tiny little knit patterns to make it look like a sweater, which is so fun. And something that's really unique about the Simon Hurley Create background stamps is, of course, you can stamp this as the full background, but then each one of these lines of the design is split apart, so you can stamp them separately as well, which makes this really unique. So if you want to do each stripe in a different color, you totally can, and you get all of that amazing versatility. So all you need to do is peel these out like this, and each line will come a part of the design, and you can use them separately and individually to stamp them across the card in different colors. And if you need an acrylic block that's the perfect size, we designed one in my collection. This is the Simon Hurley Create large acrylic block, and this will fit these stamped images perfectly. So across the 6x6 image, and then you're able to pick it up and stamp it down onto your card. And the grid lines in this block make it really easy to line up and continue the design along your card. And to stamp it back as one background stamp, just piece them right back together like a puzzle. Place it right down on the acetate sheet. It fits together absolutely perfectly. And then when you're putting the last stamp in, you might need to just kind of bend the rubber a little bit, and then it fits together perfectly like a puzzle, and you're able to stamp the full stamp together. So tons of versatility with this one, but I love that pattern and texture that's going throughout to make it look like it was knit. Next we have this photopolymer stamp set called Silly Santas, and these are just absolutely adorable. I loved the different Santa images that are in here. Again, they're a bit retro, but what I love about them so much is that you're able to stamp them down in your card, and you don't really have to do too much coloring with these images if you don't want to. I tend to just use a red ink so that his suit is stamped in red, and you get these really wonderful kind of Santa icons as the focal point on your card making project. And I also wanted some really great large sentiments because we were missing some sentiments, so a lot of great sentiments that go along with Christmas and the Santa Clauses that are in this set. So we have Santa Claus is coming to town, ho ho ho, you're on the naughty list, he's making a list and checking it twice, wishing you a magical Christmas season, so I wanted a couple little smaller ones you could use as well. He's gonna find out if you're naughty or nice, and then Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. So some really great big and bold sentiments to go along with these Santa images. I think you can stamp these down as kind of a focal point on the card and then have the Santa accent it, and it creates some really great simple but yet adorable and playful Christmas cards. And then of course you can get the coordinating die set to go along with it. Again, there's lots of little details in these Santas, so great to have all of the different dies to cut out the different Santas. And then we have ho ho ho. You get the word and shadow dies for all of them, and they're the same size and font as these here, so you're able to sort of match them up if you want to, but I wanted to separate them out just so you can have your own creativity on how you place them on your card, if you want to make a little collage around the Santa, or if you want to line them all up straight in a line. It's up to you. Alright, I'm going to create a fun and playful card using the Silly Santas stamp set. I love all the different Santas. They just kind of make me smile and laugh, and the fun sentiments to pair along with it are great too. So I'm gonna go in with this Santa image that looks like he's reading a book, and then I'll do the, he's making a list and checking it twice. So to stamp this down, of course, you could do it in your MISTI if you want to, again, to really build up the layers. But here I'm just gonna do it with the one stamping. So I'm gonna use a little bit of Love Struck ink, which is my lighter kind of pinkish red color. And then I'll go in using some Game Over, which is that darker maroon color. And I'm just going to roll that darker color kind of around the edge to give it some depth and dimension. So just kind of taking the edge of your ink pad and gently rolling it onto the surface. and stamp this right down onto our card. All right, I'm gonna lift that off. Again, if you wanna really build up the color, you could totally do that in your MISTI, but I love how it turns out with that little two-tone effect on the Santa. And again, you don't need to do too much coloring. If you want to, you can color in the book and the rest of him, but I'm just gonna leave it white. All right, then again, we'll go into the coordinated die set to cut this guy out, find the right Santa, and then we'll go in with our mint tape, make sure there's a nice even white border around the image, and then tape it down to hold it in place while we run it through our die cutting machine. And check out how perfectly that cuts out around all the details and gives a nice even border. For the background for Santa, I'm gonna use the Nordic Knit background stamp. I'm gonna do sort of a tone-on-tone effect, but like I said, you could stamp this in several colors and make it a great focal point as well. So I'm gonna go in using a bit of Game Over ink and ink up the whole background stamp. And once that's done, we'll go in with a maroon piece of cardstock, place it right down onto our background. And then again, I'll go in with the pressure tool and just go in and press all around to make sure that all of the details of the stamp transfers beautifully. And check out that gorgeous stamped design, and I love all of that really great knit texture in there. You really get to see all of the little details of that beautiful wintry pattern. Then I'll go in and spray this down with some water, and what I love about Simon Hurley Create inks is they clean off with water and they don't stain at all, which is super nice. Even the reds, where they usually would stain, they don't with my inks. The sentiment is quite large, and I don't want to cover up my whole stamped background. So I'm going in with a piece of vellum, and I'm gonna do some heat embossing onto here for our sentiment. So I'm going in with some anti-static powder tool to make sure no powder sticks where we don't want it to. And then I'll go in with some Versamark clear sticky ink, and I'm going to ink up my sentiment, and then we can stamp it right down onto the vellum. And then we'll lift it off. And for this, I'm gonna go in using some white heat embossing powder, throw it over the top, and that's gonna stand out really beautifully on that vellum. We'll tap off the excess, and then we'll heat it until it's nice and bright white. And then once you do start heating it, you wanna do quick bursts of air. So kind of on and off to make sure that the vellum doesn't warp. Because it's so thin, you don't wanna burn it and get it too hot. So just go back and forth from your project, and then off a little bit, and then back on to make sure you get a great heat embossed effect. Again, I want to give the sentiment more of a finished look instead of just leaving it on a rectangle. So again, I'll go right in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors, leaving a little bit of a border all the way around the sentiment, and I'll cut this out pretty simply and easily. Sometimes vellum can be tricky though since it's see-through, but I found that this tape runner from ThermoWeb does a pretty good job of masking the adhesive that we add down behind it. So what I'm going to do is just add down a little bit of this tape runner all over the image, and you just want to do little spurts of this behind the embossed image. And once I find out the perfect placement, we can then add this right down onto the card. And you can see that adhesive is pretty much masked behind it. You can barely see it, which is really great. And we'll pop this adorable Santa image up off the card. And there we have our finished card. Super simple and easy, no coloring involved. I love those adorable Santa images. They're so fun and playful. So this one goes along with that sentiment just perfectly. And then that Nordic knit texture in the background is the perfect addition to add a little bit more detail and dimensions to the card without taking away from the focal point. Now there's also a smaller sentiment in here that says he's gonna find out if you're naughty or nice. And I thought this would be perfect for the inside of the card. And stamp it right down at the top inside of this card. So it's just kind of fun and playful, and then you can write your personalized note right underneath it. So then it says he's making a list and checking it twice, and he's gonna find out if you're naughty or nice. That's perfect. Now this next set is a little bit different. It's a 6x6 rubber stamp set called Winter Things. And we do these stamp sets in rubber every once in a while when we find that the designs fit a little bit better. So we did it with paint swatches here. We also did it with the treescapes backgrounds as well. So these are in red rubber just because we found that they were going to stamp better since they were super solid images. So with this one, we decided it would be best to do in red rubber because this background is quite large and there's also lots of little details, but then also lots of solid areas. So we wanted to make sure you get an even stamping all the way across, and this red rubber that's made by Stampers Anonymous is just etched so beautifully, so you get such a great stamped impression. But then we didn't want to waste any of the surface area, so that's where we went in and we actually did different images as well. So you have several different options of those gifts, you have some berries and leaves that you can use, and then that adorable little snowman. I just thought he was so much fun. And then of course we included two sentiments as well, just to give it lots of versatility. You have Merry Christmas and Deck the Halls. But this stamp set is really awesome. I love that hand-drawn feel of it, but that bold effect that it has, and then this really great winter collage of lots of different winter and Christmas icons that you would find. And I also love this stamp because it sits on an A2 size card really nicely with just a little bit of a border all the way around. All right, for this card set, I want to show how easy it is to use the Winter Things background and stamp set. So I'm going to peel off this larger background. I think this is going to be great for really easy Christmas cards. And I'm going to use my MISTI stamping tool so I can stamp this in the same place several times if I need to. And I'll place my background stamp right in the center. And this fits right in the center of an A2 size card with just a little bit of room around the borders. Then I'll lift this up, and actually, when you're stamping with red rubber stamps, you want to remove this insert. So this foam insert needs to come out of your MISTI, and then it will stamp down perfectly because the red rubber stamps are a little bit thicker. And then I'm gonna do some heat embossing. So I'm gonna go in with my anti-static powder tool and go all over the card to make sure no powder is gonna stick where we don't want it to. And then we'll go in using a bit of clear sticky VersaMark ink, and I'm just going to go in and ink up the background stamp completely. That looks perfect. And then we'll go in and add some pressure down. And if you want to, you can go in with a pressure tool to sort of help press that down and make sure that it stamps nicely. Perfect. All right, and because we got all the supplies out and have everything lined up, why not do more than one? So I'm just gonna go back in with my VersaMark, and I'll stamp this down onto another piece of my stark white cardstock. So it's a really easy and great way to make lots of Christmas cards at once. Then to do my heat embossing, I got my stamped panel over top of a piece of folded cardstock, which is going to catch any excess embossing powder. And I'll pour my embossing powder right over top. Here I'm using Gilded, which is a beautiful gold color from Brutus Monroe. I'll kind of add that down, and then I'll let it fall to the other side of the card to make sure that everything is coated in this gold embossing powder, and then we'll tap off any of the excess. Then the great thing about having this folded piece of cardstock is we can go back in with any of the excess and dump it right back into the jar. Then to set this in place, we'll go in with our heat tool and heat it up until it's nice and bright gold. And check out just how stunning this background is, just simply heat embossed in gold. It looks absolutely beautiful, and this is a simple way to make a lot of cards at once. If you want to stop here and just do this on colored cardstock, you totally could, but we're going to step this up a notch. Now for these cards, I used stark white cardstock pretty intentionally, and that was so that I can go in with my inks, and you guys know I love to step things up with inks and really give it tons of depth and dimension. So here I'm going in using a bit of bee sting, and I'm just going to cover all of the cardstock. Now of course you could start out with a piece of colored cardstock, but I like to just go in and add color down using ink. So I'll just add a nice solid color of this red. I'm using the ink stand so I don't have to hold my ink pad in place, and it stays there really nicely. And I'm also using these domed foam blending tools, which I really like because they apply tons of ink at once, so you get a really nice solid and saturated color. And check out that beautiful blend on our cardstock. And then we'll place in Game Over, which is our darker red maroon color, and I'll go in and do the blending with this. Now when I blend with my darker color, to add depth and dimension to this, I want to blend around the edge. Now you could blend and make the bottom darker, but here I want to make all the edges darker so that it draws your eye into the center of the card. Just like in photography when they create a little bit of a vignette, that's what you're doing here. By creating the edges darker and leaving the center lighter, it naturally draws your eye into there. And that's a great technique if you want to build dimension and naturally draw their eye into the center. That's gorgeous. All right, now before we call it quits, I want to go in with a cloth and just buff off the surface of the embossing powder. The embossing will resist the ink, but the ink might still sit on the top of the surface. So you just want to go in with a dry cloth and wipe it off to clean off the embossing and make it really nice and shiny again. All right, same thing with this background. I'm going in with my lightest color first. Here I'm going to use a little bit of Overzealous, again with the domed foam blending tools so we can really quickly apply ink. Check out how easily and smooth that color goes down. It's part to do with the domed foam blending foam, but also the Simon Hurley Create inks put down tons of color, and they're really great at blending and smoothing out between colors, which I really love because ink blending is one of my favorite techniques to do. So I'll just quickly cover this background in light green. Then I'll move into the next color, which is Later Gator. It's one step up from Overzealous, and we can start doing our blending. Again, I'm gonna do it all around the edge, but if you want to get creative with where you add your shading, totally feel free to do so. And then lastly, we'll go in using a bit of fake plant, and we'll just go right around the edge, a little bit closer, to add that darker color and get even more depth and dimension. That is so beautiful and really intense. And check out how gorgeous that green background is with tons of depth and dimension against the gold embossed images. It's just stunning. And we're gonna keep it super simple by just placing these right onto stark white top folding card bases. And that just gives it a nice white border on the card. And then I love that we included sentiment in this set too, so we'll pull the sentiments right out, add them down to an acrylic black. And to make them stand out, I'm gonna stamp them down in black so that they're kind of the darkest thing on the card and it draws your eye right to them. So I'll stamp them down using some VersaFine Clair to get a nice jet black image. And red rubber stamps just stamp so beautifully every time. And then with that VersaFine ink, it's a pigment ink, so it takes a little bit longer to dry. So I'll throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder, and then we'll heat set this until it's clear and shiny. This sets the ink into place so it won't smear, and it also makes them nice and shiny. For sentiments, you can leave these on a rectangle cardstock, but I like to go in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors and fussy cut these out. I just find that going around, leaving a little bit of a border around the sentiment just gives them a more finished look. And also when you cut closer to the sentiment, you're able to see more of the background, which I really like since I don't want to cover too much of it up. All right, then I'll pop the sentiment up on some foam tape, and we can really easily pop this up on the front and center of our card. I love how these cards turned out. They're so stunning and elegant, and they were really simple to create as well. I could totally see doing a full card set of these in lots of different Christmassy colors, and then you can send them out or give them as a gift as a card set. I think that's a lot of fun to do as well. But no matter what, I just love the ink blending to create lots of depth and dimension, and that background stamp is beautiful. Next we have the Retro Holiday Clear 6x9 Photopolymer stamp set. This one might be my favorite. It's got a beautiful retro look to the stamp set. You actually might recognize these ornaments because last year we did them in Glimmer Hot foil plates. This year we took a different image from that sort of same style of set and created a stamp out of it. So now you're able to stamp the design in all of that amazing detail, and each one has a solid image to go along with it, so you can easily color in this image just by using stamping. Next we have this really large and solid Christmas tree that says a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And then we also have that sentiment repeated down here in case if you want to use it on its own, or if you want to stamp inside of the tree, inside of the sentiment in a different color. I love how bold and intense this large tree is. It's a great and easy focal point, and also can be used for lots of different techniques. We've separated the star so you can stamp it on top in a yellow color. And then there's also a bunch of gifts in this stamp set too. And these gifts are so much fun. Some of these grayer areas are actually a bunch of tiny little dots that make up that image. So that's where you're able to get little details and shading in the image by using those dots to create kind of a halftone pattern. And then you've got some solid images to stamp inside and do sort of a two-step layering with these gifts to color them in really super easily. And then tons of wonderful sentiment in this set. I love that kind of scripty font. So we have You're Such a Gift, wishing you a joyful holiday season, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays from our home to yours, and wishing you peace and joy throughout the holiday season. So some great sentiments to use throughout the cards. And along with this, you can purchase the coordinating die set, which has dies to cut out all of the different images in this set, which is really super helpful. And it has two of those larger sentiments in here that you're able to cut out using the coordinating dies. This is super helpful with all the little details on the ornaments, those jagged edges of the tree. Look how detailed that star is. And same thing with these little ornament strings. This is going to be a really helpful set of dies to have. So I've been looking for a little bit better of a die storage because some of those thin magnetic sheets that I used, the dies would kind of flap off, and I don't want to lose any of the dies in my collection. So I found these sheets from Stampin' Storage. They're kind of backed with a little bit of this kind of shiny cardboard, which makes them nice and thick and super sturdy. So this makes it so that none of the dies are going to fall off even if these kind of flap or move around, which is super nice. And then to get the dies off, you just bend it slightly and you're able to pull the die off really easily, use it in your project, and then stick it right back down to the sheet. So this has been super helpful. I'll link to these down below as well in case you want to check them out. I just like how nice and sturdy they are to hold all of my dies. Next, let's do some easy and beautiful stamping using the Retro Holiday stamp set. I'm obsessed with this big tree, so I want to show that in today's video. Now to stamp the tree, I'm going to do it in my MISTI stamping tool. You totally don't have to, but I want to build up several different layers and give it tons of depth and dimension, so that's why I'm doing it in the MISTI. So I'm just going to take this solid tree image and then place it down to pick it up. And then I'm going to go in with my mid-tone green color, so here I'm using a bit of Later Gator, and I'm just going to ink up this image nice and solid, and then we'll stamp it down. I don't need to be super perfect with this right away since I know we're going to be building up layers of the color, so I'm not trying to ink it up perfectly. And I'm just going to stamp this 2 to 3 times to get a nice solid layer of that color on the surface. Then I want to add some shading, so we'll go in using our darker fake plant green color. And I'm going to go in with my mini domed foam blending tool again to add some ink onto the stamp. And here we're just going to tap the ink onto the stamp all around the edge of the image. And this is just going to give some nice shading and dimension and darker color, leaving the center a lot lighter. So it's going to give it some great depth and shading. All right, so it's already starting to kind of shade that up. And this is why I did it in the MISTI, so we can keep stamping it in the exact same spot. So we'll go back in, stamp it down, and it's got tons of depth to it since we did those several layers of color. And then next we'll go in with Slippery and Wet, which is kind of this mustardy yellow color. And I'm going to ink up and stamp down that really great star image for the top of that tree. And we're gonna cut it out separately so it doesn't matter where you line it up. Now I also wanted to stamp some of those retro looking gifts down for the bottom of the tree. So first I'm gonna stamp down the outline images using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to again get a really nice solid jet black image. We'll stamp these right down onto our stark white cardstock. And these images are super cool because when you stamp them down, there's a little bit of lighter gray as well all throughout the images. And that's a bunch of tiny little dots that stamp. So instead of making it super dark and solid, it makes this nice grayscale and gives it some shading. And to set that ink into place, I'll go in using some clear heat embossing powder and heat set that. All right, and then for these images, I have this solid image as well to kind of fill them in with a little bit of color. So here I'm gonna use some bee sting for this bow, and they're really quite easy to just line up on top of that image, stamp it down, and it sort of just colors it in, adds a bit of color to the image. Next, we'll go in with some blue No Diving ink for this polka dotted package, and then stamp it right down onto the card. And last but not least, we'll use a bit of Later Gator green ink. So it just adds a great accent color and still keeps that great retro look to the gifts. All right, then we're gonna cut these out. So I'll go into the coordinated die set and find all of the images that we want to cut out. So I'll just go in using a little bit of mint tape, and then you want to make sure to line up the image, making sure there's an even white border, and then we'll hold it down using some mint tape. I really love this stuff because it doesn't rip your cardstock, even when you run it through the pressure of your die cutting machine. Lots of other tapes do rip, so this has been amazing. Then I'll lay these in my Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and we'll run it right through to cut them out. And these cut out just beautifully with a nice white border all around the image. Check out all of that detail that it cuts around the tree. Now to finish off this card, I wanted to mention there's lots of different backgrounds that I've released in the past for Christmas that you can look in your collection to create a great texture in your background. We have the Plaid Builder stamp where you can peel apart all of these plaid pieces and use them separately, or use this as a full background to create your own beautiful plaid. And then we have this beautiful wood grain background stamp. It's got tons of little dots just like those gifts that make up the darker areas and the lighter areas. And when you stamp this down into craft, it looks like a real wood grain. I'm going to use this for today's card. I'll leave links down below to those old stamps too, but be sure to check out your stash to see if you have any textures you could use for the card. So I love that we designed this stamp to have kind of knots and a little bit more on one side, and then a little bit more of a faint design on the other side, so you can sort of choose what you want to use on your card front. I think I'm going to use this side with a little bit more of that faint pattern. I'm going to go in using a little bit of Gur ink, which is my mid-tone brown color, but if you want more of the texture to show up, just go in with a darker brown, and then it'll be a little bit more intense. So I'll go in and ink up this whole background stamp, and I'm just going to place this right on into that stamp. And then to stamp down a background stamp, I like to just go in with a pressure tool, and I just press all the way around it to make sure we're gonna get everything stamped down really nicely with all of that detail. And when we lift that off the surface, check out that beautiful stamped impression that we have, and it creates such a cool wood grain with those darker areas and lighter areas. It looks so realistic on top of craft colored cardstock like this. Now, me being me, I didn't want to end it here. I want to add just a little bit more depth and dimension to this. So I'll just go around with my ink blending tool and just lightly touch these edges to give it a darker tone around the edge and to add some shading to it. And by leaving the center a little bit lighter, it'll draw your eye to the center where we'll put our focal point down onto the card. See, it just steps it up a notch and adds lots of shading. All right, then we'll add the tree right down onto our card. And then we'll pop the star up on top. And again, I love all the little details when it cuts that out, and then it doesn't just leave a bunch of white space. And then we'll start popping the gifts up on the card as well, kind of underneath the tree. And this just adds a little bit of dimension and kind of creates a little bit of scene on the card. And how adorable is that? I love the Christmas tree with the sentiment inside. That solid stamping was so much fun. But like I said, that can be great for techniques as well. And then incorporating those gifts and the wood grain into the background really brings it together. It's pretty gender neutral too, and I know a lot of you are looking for masculine cards, so this is a great masculine Christmas card that you can send to any guy in your life as well. And then here is that same card, just without the gifts. So you can totally switch it up whichever way you want to do it. It looks beautiful either way. Next up, we have this 6x6 background stamp called Stippled. I was gonna call it Stippled Snow because it really is going to work as snow for all your Christmas cards, but I wanted to call it Stippled because I think this is going to take on a life of its own for me after the Christmas season is over, because this is just a really great collage of dots. Of course, the dots are a lot heavier up top here, but then they kind of fade down slowly until you gradually get to less and less, and they're a little bit more sporadic at the bottom here. What I love about this then is you're able to kind of choose how you stamp it on your A2 card, because of course the 6x6 is a little bit bigger. So you can kind of stamp it down at the bottom a little bit more if you want less, or at the top if you want more. Here you can stamp it up here for a lot more, or down here for a lot less. So it really just depends on how concentrated you want the snow on your card, but it can also work as rain if you stamp it in blue later on in different seasons. But this is also just a great texture stamp. Let's say to stamp in a background to add lots of depth and dimension, or to stamp on some like floral die cuts to just give the paper a little bit more texture to it. And this was amazing to do in red rubber. Check out all of that amazing detail. We wouldn't have been able to do that in a clear stamp. There is so much insane detail with all of those little dots. And Stampers Anonymous does such a great job with these red rubber stamps. Now I said there was gonna be something for people who love to color as well. And this next set is called Winter Wonderland, and it's great for coloring if you wanna do that, because there's lots of open images that you can really color in and have tons of fun. But there's also some more solid images as well, in case if you just wanna do the stamping and create your scene. I love all of the different houses in here. You've really got tons of detail in all of these house images that you do, with all of the little lines across the house and in the trees and snow. It's really such a cool textured stamp. This arch is so beautiful and unique for kind of a fun focal point on a card, almost looking out of a window. And then you also have different images. So like I love these small clusters of houses to sort of create a background or create a nice focal point in the center. And then of course some larger houses as well. I wanted to mix up the scale and give you lots of different options. And then also different types of trees as well. So you have these sort of trees which are kind of snow capped, and then you have these evergreens as well. So just different varieties with lots of details. And then of course I just pack all the open space with sentiments, and this set is no exception. We have wishing you a season full of love and laughter, ho ho ho, season's greetings, there's no place like home for the holidays, silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, sending peace and joy, Merry Christmas, love you, and then you have Noel, joy, and peace. So lots of different options. Again, I love the classic font that's in this set, and a lot of these sentiments will pair really beautifully with the house images. And then of course there's a coordinating die set you can purchase with this set as well. This has a die for this house up here, this one right here, the arch, and then all of the 4 trees in the set. We didn't include one for this one because there's lots of little details. It's kind of awkward to cut out. Of course, if you want a fuss to cut it, it'll be pretty easy, but this one we meant to mainly kind of stamp several times as a background. Next, let's do a little bit of coloring using the Winter Wonderland stamp set. I love this one, and I want to color this little cabin that's up here. And then to get a nice jet black image for coloring again, I'm going in using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and there's tons of details in this image. I think it's just beautiful. So I'll stamp it right down onto my card. And check out that wonderful stamped impression. To set it in place, I'm gonna go over with some clear embossing powder. This helps to set it in place, but also for watercoloring, it gives us a little guide to kind of stay inside the lines. So I find that super helpful. I'll tap off the excess and heat it until it's clear and shiny. All right, then to create a palette of color that we're gonna use for watercoloring, I'm just gonna go in using my Simon Hurley Create ink pads, and we'll just smoosh them right down onto our craft sheet to create a nice palette of color. All right, now I'm already getting fingerprints on here, but don't worry, we're gonna be cutting this out anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna go in first starting off with a little bit of water. I always start off with water when I'm doing watercoloring. It just sort of prepares the cardstock to take any of the ink colors, and that way the ink won't sink right into the surface, because if it's completely dry, that ink's gonna sink right in and not move at all. Then once we got that first layer of water down, we're able to go in with our color. So here I'm using Bee Sting, and I'm just gonna do kind of a wash of red all over this house. Super easy to do, and you can see that water makes it blend really nicely and gives us a super smooth image. Then I'm gonna go in with less water, and I'm gonna go into a darker color. So here I'm using Game Over, and I'm just going to dot this on, and it gives us a much darker, deep, rich color. to add some shadows and dimension all around the image. And if you want to blend it out, just use a little bit more water and it blends together beautifully. When coloring something that's super white like this snow, you want to go in with just a little bit of a light gray color. So here I'm using just a little bit of woof, and I'm just going to lightly touch that color in all throughout. That way it gives kind of the depth and dimension, and it's not just stark white, because every white image like this has a little bit of shading. So adding that gray in just kind of brings it to life and gives it some depth. And then lastly, we'll add water down to the trees before we start our coloring. And then I'll quickly add my wash of green all throughout. And then using a little bit less water, I'll go into the darker green and just start to add some shading all throughout to give these a bit more dimension. I love the depth and shading we were able to add with those different colors. I also hope you found those watercolor tips super helpful. I find that using a regular brush instead of a water brush gives you a lot of control. And then also adding water down first helps to blend those colors together and get the best results. Doing those little things really help, because I struggled with watercolor at first as well, but those make it a lot easier to get great results. Then to cut this out, we'll bring in the coordinated die set and grab the die, place that down, and then we'll use a little bit of mint tape to hold it in place so it doesn't shift while we run it through our die cutting machine. Pop this right out, and I love that it cuts out that inside piece of the smoke as well. It really gets into all the different details and cuts it out really beautifully. Now I want to create a snowy background behind this house, so I'm going to go in using this stippled background stamp. It's just gorgeous. I'm going to start off using a little bit of my anti-static powder bag on my stark white cardstock to just make sure that no powder is going to stick where we don't want it to. And then we'll go in with our VersaMark clear sticky ink and we'll ink up our background stamp. So just ink up all of this snow, and then we're easily able to place this down into our background. Now you can place it up top if you want more of that concentrated snow, but if you want more of that sporadic snowy look, you can place it more towards the bottom, and then use our pressure tool to press this down and get all of the details to stamp beautifully. And we lift this off. You can't see much right now, but we're going to do our heat embossing. So I'll go in with some clear heat embossing powder, but you could also use white here if you want to, since we're doing it on top of white cardstock. We'll lay that down, tap off any of the excess, and our snow is starting to form now, and then we'll throw it on the other side as well, and tap off any of the excess. All right, then I can create my snowy sky. So I'm going to go in starting off with a little bit of clear skies and my domed foam blending tools again. And again, we can just really easily and quickly lay down a lot of color with these and using the inks. And you can see that it resists that snow beautifully and creates that nice white snowy effect. Next, I'll bring in No Diving, which is my nice mid-tone blue color. We'll bring it down on the background to create a little bit more depth and a darker blue in the sky. And then last but not least, we'll darken it up even more using a bit of Midnight Snack right at the top. And I just love how easily these blues blend together to create this beautiful blue snowy sky. All right, then I'll go in with my dry cloth and just buff off the top, and that's going to bring that back to a really nice bright white color on the surface and remove any of the ink that was sitting on top of the embossing. Make sure your cloth is clean because I accidentally wiped some excess ink, but we'll cover that with the house, so don't worry. And then to create a little hill that our house is going to sit upon, I'm just going to go in with quite a large scissors and just create a tiny bit of a slope. Nothing too big, just a little bit of a hill there. All right, then let's add everything together. We'll add this down using a little bit of tape runner. And when it comes to adhering it to a top folding card, I always start in the top left corner, line it up, and then we'll follow up to the top right corner. And that should line it up easily with the rest of the card. Adhere it down. And the reason I do that is in case if there's any excess white space, we can always cut it off the edges, but we can't cut it off of the fold. So that's why I line up the fold first, and then we'll trim these down. Next, we'll adhere down this little hill right at the bottom of our card. And then we'll finish it off by adhering this house right down on the center on top of that hill, and then we'll adhere it down into place. And that creates such a beautiful and peaceful snowy scene on the front of our card. All right, and there's tons of sentiments you can use in here. I love that sentiment that says sending peace and joy, so I'll use that. And since we're right at the end of the card, I'm putting this in the MISTI. I'm not risking anything here of it being imperfect. So then we can line it up right underneath that house, and I'll use the grid lines of the MISTI to make sure that it's nice and lined up, really super straight. And then again, we'll go in using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to stamp down that sentiment and make it super crisp and jet black. Stamp that down, and that turned out perfectly. So here's a closer look at that finished card. I love that adorable and gorgeous house on the front of the card using the Winter Wonderland stamp set, and then finishing it off with the stippled background stamp to create that snow. I love how that sky looks, but like I said, that snow background stamp is going to be so wonderful for all season long to create tons of texture on your cards. Alright friends, thank you so much for joining me for today's Christmas and July launch of stamps and dies. I'll leave links down below for everything that I used in today's video and the new launch so you can check it out. And remember, using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Leave me a comment down below letting me know which card or project was your favorite. I can't wait to chat with you guys down there. And as always, there will be tons more inspiration coming in future videos using these products right now and later when we create more Christmas cards at the end of the year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye!